Hey, everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 221 here, back in today to talk about Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 49 of 2024. And today we don't necessarily have a mini episode of the this Weekly Shonen Jump series that I do. We have actually a mini episode. What I mean by that is, while reading this week of Jump, I of course read the 12 series that I keep up with in Jump, and just read them all about 30 minutes ago at this point, and sort of like stewed on my thoughts on them. And I want to mute Discord. That would be very nice real quick, but sorry, it's actually something I sort of need to respond to, so let me do that real quick and then I can talk about Jump. Alright, now that's that done, I sort of lost my train of thought, but yes, I read the 11 series, or my 12 series that I read, and while reading this week of Jump, it's a good week of Jump. I mean, it's not an issue that's going to go down into history books, but still it's one that I think was decently interesting, and I really struggled coming together and figuring out what 6th series I wanted to talk about, because normally with Jump it's like, oh hey, I really liked a lot of these and I think they're really cool, and let me come here and let me settle down, like, I want to talk about a whole bunch of them, but I think only I'm going to be talking about these 6, the ones that I think would make the best content in the long run for, of course, my YouTube channel, which is not only a way for me to get my thoughts out to you, but also needs to be entertaining enough for you guys to watch and not go and watch some other YouTuber do this instead, right? So because of that, and also for the notion of, hey, I want to just talk about Jump every single week, even while I'm getting caught back up on it, which is why we're doing these mini episodes right now, I really just figured, you know what, I still want to talk about a few of these chapters, so today we're just going to be doing 4 of them and not the higher total of like 6 that we have been doing. These 4, as you'll see in the video, are of course Hunter x Hunter, or Hunter x Hunter, going to be the first time I actually sit down and properly talk about it on the chapter. Ichi the Witch, Akane-banashi, and Ultimate Excess Kiyoshi. Not in that order, I don't know why I said them in that order, but that's sort of what it is there. But those definitely had some good chapters that I want to talk about today. But yeah, with that, like I said, I don't think these are all the good ones. Like Kagurabachi, I very much enjoy Kagurabachi so much that I do actual chapter reviews on my channel. Go check out those. But yeah, let's just hop into it again with Hunter x Hunter chapter number 405. This chapter is titled Performance. Now, as Hunter x Hunter goes, if I'm going to sit down here and truly talk about every little bit of information that we get here, it is going to take me like 45 minutes to get through all my thoughts on it. So we're going to be omitting a few of the details of this chapter. And also, I don't remember every single character's name in Hunter x Hunter, but I know it close enough to get approximately correct, right? But we start off this chapter number 405, Top Performance, in a casino on the first floor of, on the first floor of the tacking ship that is currently going towards the lanes beyond. I can't remember terminology right now, but we see somebody is playing cards here, just saying like one more, and this lady's like, hey, isn't poker played of 5 cards? And the dealer pretty much explains like, hey, this guy's playing a game called Square X. It uses multiple decks, and right now he's doing Square 3. When you get a duplicate card, you can increase your hand size and with it the payout, right? But hey, if you win, the stakes are set for the power of how many one mores you have sort of claimed, right? Eventually, the person who is playing this game calls the game, and we see that it is none other than Hisoka, who is sitting down here and playing with it. And as he flips his cards over, we see that he has a 3, a 3, a 3, a 3, a 3, and then 2 ace of spades. We see that out of the 5 threes that he has, we've got 1 club, 1 spade, 1 diamond, and then 2 of the 3 of hearts, and then 2 ace of spades, which is pretty damn interesting and pretty lucky for a guy, right? Well, we now get some talking from Hisoka pretty much, as he's just going through his mind palace like, really, I've got plenty of normal tastes. When I heard about exterminating the ants, it didn't turn me on, because they were simply ants. The tremendous rumbling I felt numerous times here in this boat, finding out it was a group ability made possible through support of a nin beast crafted by the power of a ceremony, it really turned me off. You see, I'm normal. I'm not interested in bestiality or an orgy. I can't get aroused. I'm just a guy who wants to be with someone one-on-one so we can love each other to death. And we see a little bit of an interesting visual here that Hisoka's playing with like a robot doll of some kind, and as he's dancing around with it, it's just exploding to pieces in Hisoka's arms. It's a really interesting visual we get here, right? But Hisoka just continues like, hey, it's sad, but oh well, there's always Solitaire, right? We then see one of the fake Hisokas, who we will learn in a second, presumably seems to be one of the Phantom Troop member Bolinev, if I'm not mistaken is how you pronounce his name. And we see that he sees the real Hisoka, and he's just like, wow, I didn't think I'd actually come across him here in the Tier 1 VIP casino. Like, he's not another fake, is he? But he eventually realized that he is the real Hisoka. We then cut to a little bit of a conversation between both Chrollo and Bolinev, where Chrollo pretty much explains like, hey, I want you to turn into Hisoka and sort of lure around and make it up to Tier 1 this way. But once you find the real Hisoka, I want you to transform into another body. Wait for me, and I'll decide whether or not we will fight it, right? We see that Bolinev transforms into another body. I don't know if this is the body of somebody else we've seen before, or if this is something of that, but we also get an explanation for what Bolinev's power is. Transformation Metamorphosin is one of Bolinev's abilities. He can transform into someone he has talked to in person. The time he can maintain a transformation is equal to the time spent with that person, right? There's no limit in body size, but the smaller the body compared to Bolinev's, the shorter he feels, and the shorter time he can remain transformed, right? So if it's not sort of the person that Bolinev thinks that he is, it's a person, it sort of affects his knit ability. Pretty interesting there, right? Bolinev then sort of just has a little bit of a flashback to whatever him being the fake Hisoka that we saw in like 10 or so chapters ago during that whole thing where like the two Char R members, maybe, the person who's on the IV drip and then the person who's able to punch and get people ask a question and punch, and their soul would pretty much tell the answer, right? We see that he ended up killing her after all that happened, so we knew that wasn't a real Hisoka, but we knew it was a Hisoka clone of some type, right? And we see the IV drip guy is like, oh wow, you're Hisoka, right? But then the woman who he actually killed, and then replaced her body with his, pretty much, so sort of like an impersonator, pretty much says like, no, that's not how it is. And Hisoka learns a little bit of the rules of all of this stuff, right? Bolinev then goes on like a little bit of a whole thing like, hey, after that, I killed everybody and I eventually made it up here to Tier 1. And here's the thing though, I don't want to let Chrollo know that I've transformed and that I have found real Hisoka. Like, I'd actually like Fink's group to deal with it in the long run, but we all know Chrollo is hurting over Shaw and Rotopi, and he's trying to act like he's fine, but we all know that he is not whatsoever, right? So he pretty much explains like, hey, everybody here in the Phantom Truth wants to be able to kill Hisoka first to keep Hisoka from having to go through that personal pain and all of that sort of stuff, right? And he says like, hey, that's why everybody wants to kill Hisoka first before Chrollo can get to him. Chrollo, you've kept the number 9 seat slot empty this whole time, and we all understand you. Let's let Hisoka be the last and close the curtain on this performance, right? Pretty much saying like, hey, he was number 9, he tricked us all just to fight you because he's weird like that, so a little bit of an interesting thing there. Eventually, we see that Chrollo is wandering around, presumably Tier 1 or one of these other tiers, and there's a news broadcast that is pretty much talking about this philanthropist named, let's see, his name is Mr. Rinsnorf. He's the chairman of a philanthropy organization, Mom's Help. He died, and the suspects have not been caught. I think what we're supposed to be getting from here is that Chrollo was the presumed murderer of this guy for some reason or another. I may not remember Hunter x Hunter lore exactly enough, because I did not go back and reread the entire series of Hunter x Hunter to get prepared for these chapters. I just went back and read the whole Succession War arc again from like chapter number 340 all the way now to 405. So if there was like something of this in like previous chapters, I don't quite remember, right? At this point, we cut over to the Phantom Troop of Fink's group, who is over talking with, if I'm not mistaken, the Char R branch of the Kakine Mafia, pretty much, right? They're pretty much just talking back and forth, and Nobunaga asks, like, hey, you guys have known Haley for a long time, right? And they're like, no, their new boss recently took over. Nobunaga's like, okay, I guess that's why it's so hard to predict what they're very much thinking. The underboss pretty much says, like, yeah, I suppose, but eventually, Nobunaga, I'm sorry, I don't quite remember all of the names here, so I'm trying to have to, like, remember on the fly, which can be a little hard at first, but yeah, Nobunaga just says, like, hey, if you're not even a functional mafia family, it's honestly hard to notice that something's off, right? The underboss of the Char just says, like, hey, what are you trying to say about all of this? And Nobunaga just says, like, just that. Is Healy really on this ship? What do you think about all of this, right? And the actual, like, more refined boss of Char, if I'm not mistaken, just is like, hey, it is an interesting idea. If they're not the Haley, then who really are they, right? Finks eventually asks, like, hey, what is the current boss like? And the underboss just explains, like, hey, it's a young woman named Morina, a royal descendant without succession rights, right? And he pretty much says, like, hey, it's not like we don't know her at all, but we're not very close enough to her to know really what she wants from us, right? Nobunaga says, like, hey, we didn't find anything concrete in our search, but we do know some things from fighting them, right? He says they seem to be doing whatever they want. In case in point, the wall guy came over and got himself killed, but when we went to their hideout, they were organized and their behavior showed us they were under some leadership, right? Their leader decides the strategy and specific tactics are left to each of them. That is our style, and they're using the same playbook. The problem is, with plan A, what is their motivation, and B, what kind of orders are they operating under, right? So pretty much what is in Morina's mind is the end goal, and what is Moria telling everybody, right? And Nobunaga just is like, hey, if they're trying to crush the other families, then it all makes sense to kill other members. But they're killing civilians. Why is that? And the underboss just says, like, well, who really knows? Maybe this what's their motivation is something entirely different, right? And Nobunaga's like, you have me exactly right. Healy is trying to destroy everything, right? And the boss is like, everything? What are you talking about? And Nobunaga just explains, like, hey, yeah, everybody aboard the ship, including the royal family. In other words, they're trying to destroy Kakine itself, right? The sealed chamber of the cruise ship presents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Also, there could be multiple motivations all tying in together. The power needed to destroy everything, they're killing to get that power, right? And Finks pretty much says, like, oh yeah, using human sacrifices to obtain a supernatural power is a totally classic move. You know about contracts with limitations, right? Phaeton then just says, like, hey, they plan to kill all people anyway, so they use the number of people they kill as a competition, and thus makes powerful Nin, right? Pretty much the boss just says, like, hey, I'm not one to talk about all of this, but you really sound crazy doing all of this, and it's not just Haley, it is you guys for coming up with this plan. But here's the thing, like, hey, I understand they look like Haley, but they're not on the inside. There's something entirely different from us, the true Kakine Mafia. Char and XZU will fully cooperate with everything going on. I'm asking you to kindly go crush Haley, right? Or Healy, right? Nobunaga, Phaeton, and Finks are all just like, yeah, well, the three of us are going ahead then. Can you tell the rest of them, and also Henry, who is the XZU underboss guy that we've seen before. And at this point, the Mafia boss goes over and opens this door that's been in the corner of his room the entire time. I'm pretty sure there was something going on with that in earlier chapters, but I'm not 100% sure. The Char underboss then sort of talks like, what do I do? Morina, we've got a problem. These guys might find you way sooner than we actually expected. It accelerates the schedule a lot. We might have to use our own personal Joker. I did not know that this guy was supposedly betraying the Char to working for Morina. I don't know if we knew that as a series, but a little bit of an interesting twist there. As Nobunaga, Phaeton, and Finks all follow the Char boss through this door and this long ensuing hallway, right? At this point, we cut over to the Haley base, or the Healy base, where we see that Morina is there talking to a guy named Dogman, right? And she's like, hey, I hear how Prince Haukenberg's funeral procession is taking place. A lot of people will gather for the send-off, and it is a perfect opportunity. Dogman, do you think you're ready? And this guy just says like, yes, with everybody's help, I've leveled up a lot. I can sniff out Nin types 5 meters away, and whether or not they've learned Nin from 2 meters, right? As you see that his name is Dogman, he's an enhancer, and he is level 62, which means that he's killed at least 62 people, and yeah, he's done some things, right? And he just says like, hey, if I sniff their heads up close, I can identify them close to 100%, I will find them, right? And Morina just says like, hey, if Dog successfully finds who we're looking for, then it's a green light for us. It'll be the beginning of the end, right? A bunch of the Haley members just like do a little bit of talking and stuff, right? And eventually, one of these members just is like, hey, Morina, where did the others go, right? And Morina just is like, hey, they're level up in processing. They really want to get revenge on Henry, right? As we see a room somewhere on the ship, and we actually don't know if it's somewhere on the ship, but it is somewhere. And we see 3 people are all training their nin in there, as these are the people that Nobunaga and Henry had all fighted before. They're like, oh, it's just like Morina said, level 51 is sick for reals. Let's go hunt some mafia. At this point, we cut back over to Team Finks with, of course, Finks, Nobunaga, and Phaeton, as they eventually enter a door at the other end of this hallway, right? And the Char R leader just says like, hey, from here on out, things will be a bit rough. And as he opens the door, all of the Phantom Troop members are like, whoa, what the heck? And that's where this chapter ends. I thought it was pretty fascinating. It's pretty cool. Not only seeing Hisoka again, like, because we haven't seen him since he killed some of the Phantom Troop members all of that time ago. Also going through and seeing what Bolanev's whole thing was here, seeing a little bit of Krollo, and then eventually seeing the whole conversation between Team Finks, Morina, and eventually ending it off on, oh, what's on the other side of this door? It's pretty interesting, all things considered, right? But with that, let's move over to Ichi the Witch, chapter number 9. This chapter is titled Ninth Hunt, the Hasume Magic, Part 3. So we get a little bit of narration at the beginning of this chapter saying like, hey, the Hasume Magic, the trial it has presented to people is to make it look fabulous. As of course we see, that is what Team Descaros is doing. We see that Komagi has an idea. She's using a bunch of flowers to try to make the Hasume Magic look very beautiful, right? And she's like, oh yeah, if you want to make something fancy, you must go with flowers there, beautiful and colorful. Add a drape of some fabric that's fashionable in Nalati right now, and done. The Kumagi brand, fabulously gorgeous ensemble, right? And the Hasume Magic calls this absolute garbage, and pretty much calls Komagi worthless in every sense of the word in this moment. Eventually, it's Descaros' turn to do something, and she's just like, hey, shake it off, Mugi, it'll be okay. Sit back and let the goat handle this. I just find it so funny that Descaros is so self-centered. It's really a funny character joke, right? And Hasume Magic's like, oh, no, that's better. Let's see what lovely fashion you have, right? And Descaros pretty much is like, hey, listen up, Hasume Magic. True beauty doesn't not come from appearances. No matter how fabulous or how gorgeous you make yourself look, if you're ugly on the inside, you cannot call that true beauty. True beauty comes from inside the heart. And the Hasume Magic is like, that's not what I'm talking about. I told you to dress me up, and that is not it, right? Pretty much just taking off Descaros on this whole level here. Eventually, we see that they just do some more fashion statements, I guess, for the Hasume Magic. We see that they put her in sort of like more of a like poppy dress, a trendy dress, and a postmodern dress as you're doing it. And the Hasume Magic is like, I mean, they're all getting better, but like it's all still garbage. Like it's not like I have all day. I am a busy magic. I'll give the Witch Boy over there one more shot, but that's going to be it. And if you guys fail, I'll move on to the next village. But before I leave, I'll need to turn you all into ice cubes, right? And she pretty much just, like, imagines freezing both Ichi and Descross in a certain way, where Descross is in the form of a desk, and Ichi is the stool that you have to sit on to sit at the Descross desk, right? And she's like, oh ho, I'm so evil for doing this, right? And then she looks over to Kumagi and she's like, oh yeah, Kumagi, I don't need you, to exist right now, so don't worry about it, right? With this, Descross is like, alright, time out, guys, what's come up and play here? And Hoffman is like, okay, sounds good. And as they're talking about all of this, pretty much just going through, Kumagi's like, hey, we only have one more chance now, like, this is so hard, we're gonna end up all blocks of ice, right? And Ichi's just sitting here thinking to himself, like, inner beauty, gorgeousness, dressing up. And he thinks, oh, I want to try something. As we get this really cool panel of Ichi looking very, like, interested in what's going on here, is he's got this really cool smirk. And the first thing that Descross says is like, no, we're not doing this. As Ichi just continues on, like, hey, can you make something like this? And we don't understand what it is right now, but presumably Ichi is showing both Kumagi and Descross his plan here, right? The Hosme Magic is now just thinking to themselves over here, just like, oh god, what a total disappointment. Both the strongest witch and this witch boy too. Maybe I should just go and leave and go to the next village already. After this trash, I'll need to watch some humans struggle and suffer as they freeze as a palate cleanser. As all of a sudden, Ichi appears and says, Hosme, I'm ready. As we see that he is pretty much stripped almost completely naked, as we get really, whenever I saw this, I'm like, damn, I didn't realize Ichi the Witch is now Undead Unlock, because this really looks like a scene that would have come out of Undead Unlock. But we see that he's pretty much got a loincloth on, and we see all over Ichi's body are a bunch of various scars of different types here. We see that, like, he's got a few on his arm, he's got a few on his shoulder, on his leg, and all of this sort of stuff, right? But I just really love how Ichi looks here. As he still has his knife on his side, and we see that both Kumagi and Descross are Descross is sort of not paying attention, but Kumagi's like, oh my god, he's sort of naked, oh my god, what am I gonna do, right? But we see that they are both barefoot, and they are both wearing one of those, like, chef-knitted hairbands that the Japanese chefs wear, pretty much, right? Sort of like a sweatband in a way, right? At this point, the Hosme Magic says, like, okay, I see, are you just trying to go on for sex appeal? Like, bring it on, right? I actually want something to work here. But Ichi just says, like, hey, actually, no, right? And the shark just says, like, hey, if that's not it, are you just going to bring out a pole and start dancing or something, right? And Ichi just walks up to the pond where the Hosme Magic is, sticks his knife into it, and calls out Inazuri once more, and electrifies the Hosme Magic once again. At this point, he jumps up and dives inside of the Hosme Magic's mouth, and the magic is like, what in the world? Oh my god, what is going on here? Like, what is he thinking? As Ichi inside the belly of this shark here just calls out Inazuri once more, and he just thinks, first shallow cut right along the spine, then again and again, deeper and bolder every time, and he says it's sort of like a musical cadence of some way, as the Hosme Magic is like, what? No way! You're not going to! As we see that Ichi calls out his attack move name, Ichi style, blind fish filleting, right? As we pretty much see that he's done this, and it's sort of cool because it looks like he's almost got like a lightning sword coming out of his dagger, because of course the Raiko magic from doing this, but it looks really, really cool as he pretty much fillets up two sides of the Hosme Magic. And he just proclaims, like, hey, I'm not finished yet. And that's where we're in this chapter. I really like this idea that maybe they're going to, like, try to cook up Hosme Magic and make it beautiful in this way. Because, of course, like Ichi said, like, hey, inner beauty, but, like, the inside of it's, like, it's a fish, right? Gorgeousness, dressing up, like, maybe, like, a dressing of some kind on top of this magic. It's a really, really cool thing, and I really like this chapter, and yeah, Buff Ichi looks pretty cool, and I just like how this chapter went through and how he just calls out Inazuri and just cuts this thing in half. It's a pretty cool moment here, right? With that, let's move on to Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi, chapter number 19. This chapter is titled Sasaki versus Yuta. And that is pretty much the entire scene we get in this chapter is literally just Sasaki facing off against Yuta. As, of course, Sasaki last time had used his, like, gambling demon of some sort to, like, hold Yuta inside of this cafe of some sort. Yuta's pretty much talking down to, what's his name? Oh, yeah, Sasaki. I don't know why I forgot that. To Sasaki in this moment saying, like, hey, do you think you can really protect everybody in this city just like that? And Sasaki's like, yeah, I mean, it won't be a problem. And then Yuta uses another one of his, like, spear things to, like, puncture through the arm of this gambling monster of some sort. And pretty much as all of this happens, Sasaki just kicks Yuta straight in the face, kicking him out of the door. He then turns to the bartender and just, like, puts some money on his tray, just like, hey, sorry about all of this, you can keep the change, right? As I think in one of the funniest moments I've read all week, this bartender just says, like, that's the exact amount, though, right? Which is a little funny considering the damage that's sort of been going on in here, right? We then make it outside to where Sasaki is now walking out face off against Yuta, who is sort of recovering on the ground after all of this stuff that's just happened. Sasaki declares that Sting, as we see the gambling demon sort of turns into a cup below, and we see that he drops 3 dice into this cup. As we see that he rolls a 2, a 2, and a 5. And he's like, damn it, I rolled a 5. Not great, not terrible. As the demon's just like, oh, don't say that. As we see that Sasaki says, 5-point guardian umbrella. And he just says, like, hey, it beats rolling nothing. And the demon's like, damn right. And we see that Yuta is firing off more of these, like, abyssal spears at Sasaki. And Sasaki's blocking them with this umbrella. Innocent people look like they're about to be attacked, and the umbrella protects all of them, right? Presumably, nobody really sees and understands what's going on because this is, like, a whole thing of, like, yeah, normal people can't see demons, like the whole Bleach situation. Like, it, out of context, Bleach looks really, really funny. I'm sure that's really how this looks also, right? More spears get fired by Yuta. Sasaki's just looking like a badass, grabbing him, and eventually punches Yuta straight in the face, right? And eventually, Yuta crashes through another building, but takes a little child as a hostage, right? Just saying, like, oh, look at this, how the tables have turned, right? And Sasaki really doesn't take Yuta's shit and fires off a blast from the end of this umbrella that directly targets Yuta and not this child beside him. He then walks up to this child and gives him 2 little coupons, says like, hey, how about you and your mommy go stop by and get something yummy, okay? Like, acting really nice and cool. And the little girl's just like, I didn't really want these, though, but sort of is what it is. Yuta has now escaped to the top of a building somewhere, and Sasaki just, like, comes up just like, hey, really? Resorting to taking a kid hostage? You took it way too far, whack job, right? And just continues to pummel Yuta over and over again, like, Sasaki is really winning here. He's like, hey, give it up, Yuta. And he was like, hey, I knew you were strong, right? But Sasaki's like, hey, you're the one who's been summoning demons to Naraku City, aren't you? Just what are you plotting around here, right? He's like, hey, give up this idiocy and surrender already. Yuta's like, hey, idiocy? The real idiocy is what all of you exorcists are doing, right? None of the human refuse is worth protecting. All of you fools risking to protect them. You need to wake up, Mr. Sasaki. Join forces with us. As Sasaki's like, no, my adorable little junior really went off the rails here. Come on, Yuta, it's not too late. Come back. I'll even help you reform. But Yuta's like, oh, you're so kind, Mr. Sasaki. But it is way too late. As we see that he goes and touches his right arm, and it suddenly becomes infused with demonic power. As, Sasaki's like, Yuta, what? No, an underworld gate technique? Don't tell me. Did you really sell your soul to a devil? As we see that, because of all of this that has now happened, we see the abyssal spears that Yuta was summoning earlier have now been upgraded to more of like a big trident location. And this time, they are able to completely bust through Sasaki's umbrella, right? And now he fires off another one of his umbrella blasts, but Yuta is able to completely deflect it and swat it away, right? With that, the gambling demon that Sasaki has, turns back into a sort of like a chalice of some sort, this like cone cup, right? And Sasaki just yells again, Sting! And in it, he just goes down and he rolls a 4, 5, and a 6, right? And the gambling demon just is like, "Oh, damn it, Sasaki. I really hate to admit it, but you really have the devil's luck, right?" And Sasaki's like, "Hey, I usually lose when I gamble. The odds are supposed to even out over time, though. 4, 5, 6, instant win, Death Slayer Blade." And he runs up through and just cuts off Yuta's arm in this second as he's firing off a blast towards Sasaki, right? It's a little bit of like a bullshit thing, like, oh, he's got an instant death blade, but like, whatever. It's a little bit of like a cool thing, and just showing how Sasaki can be overpowered. It's really cool, but like, it's obviously shown here that Yuta is not the one they need to be worrying about, right? Sasaki then says like, "Hey Yuta, it's time to accept your fate." And Yuta's like, "Hey, even with this, it's still no match for you. You were in a totally different league, right?" And Sasaki's like, "What are you talking about?" And Yuta says like, "Hey, are you sure that you should really be wasting your time on me? I hear that Kiyoshi kid is wicked strong." And he's like, "What do you know about Kiyoshi, Yuta, right?" And Yuta just is like, "Hey, don't worry. All I'm here to do is simply buy time until his arrival." As all of a sudden, from behind where Sasaki's facing off with Yuta, an explosion rains down from the clouds, enveloping the school building where, of course, Kiyoshi goes. And from this, Sasaki turns around as Yuta just says like, "Hey, Mr. Sasaki, did you know human desire and curiosity knows no bounds? Those fools will summon him without me even having to lift a finger. The great demon lord has descended." As we now cut to Kiyoshi's school building, where he is now, where on top of the summoning circle that, of course, the Occult Research Club had summoned last time, they are all now passed out on the ground. But above this is a being of some kind in a dark, shadowy cloak and with a really, really long broadsword in his hand, and with a six-pointed crown levitating above his head, as this great demon lord turns around and says, "So, you're Kiyoshi Halai." And that is where we end this chapter of Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi. I really like seeing all of Sasaki's abilities in this chapter. I think they are all pretty neat, all things considered. And eventually getting through this whole point of, oh, Yuta has been a little bit of an enemy. What relationship did he really have with Sasaki? Until we eventually get to this reveal of, oh no, is Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi going to be ending soon? I hope not, but it may be happening, because this definitely feels like the final level of stuff going on. Like, oh no, the Great Demon Lord is here. Like, who is better than the Great Demon Lord? Like, I sort of thought it was weird, like, after we've already seen Kiyoshi beat, like, 3 of the Demon Lords, and now we have, like, presumably the Great, like, the #1 Demon Lord, so, like, where is there to go after from here? But a pretty cool little thing here of seeing this character's design. I really do like it. And also, Sasaki looked like a pure badass this chapter, so I'm not complaining. I now have to go and do college-related stuff, but I will be back right after I say this with Akane-banashi chapter number 133. That chapter is titled, let me find a title, There Is Always Tomorrow. So I'll see you guys now to talk about it, I guess. Hello guys, and we are now back. It has been about 3, 4, or maybe even 5 days real time since I recorded the first section of this video, of course, going through and talking about, I honestly forgot what I talked about. I think it was Hunter x Hunter, no, it wasn't even Ruri Dragon, I don't think. It was Ichi the Witch, and maybe Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi, maybe, and then we are now talking about Akane-banashi, if I am remembering things right, but there is a very grand majority of this world that I'm just forgetting that, because I have sort of taken a break from recording, editing, and doing most everything YouTube-wise at this point. Just, I was doing really good. I'd gone about a week straight recording a video every single day, just knocking things out, reading a bit of Weekly Shonen Jump, but I mean, really that does take a toll on you eventually, and eventually it's just sort of caught up with me where I'm like, alright, I need a few days break, but new Weekly Shonen Jump issues coming out today, which means that I am recording this on a Sunday, so I said, let me at least finish this one so I can be at least one issue more caught up, and I'm a lot more caught up than I was any time before, so me recording all of these videos has definitely been a good thing in general. But I think we were on Akane-banashi. Now, whenever this video comes out, I don't think you guys will be able to tell that, like, I had taken a break or for any sort of long amount of time, for the main fact of, like, I've got a backlog of, like, 3 other videos already recorded and finished that just need to get uploaded. So that's sort of where we are sitting right now in the whole Glowplasma 231 recording videos and all that sort of stuff. But before we hop into this chapter or going on to this review, I don't know where I was going with this. I think I just meant to say let's hop into Akane-banashi, chapter number 133, titled There's Always Tomorrow. I don't think I need to say anything else because I'm kind of like, this is the halfway point of a video, so let me just like continue on with it and we can talk about this good old chapter. If you can tell, I have not recorded a video in a few days, so that's sort of how it goes, right? But we start off this chapter with, of course, Akane and Master Urara getting out of Urara's general, like, car and all of that sort of stuff. And they are currently heading towards, presumably, Master Urara's house, where Urara will divulge more of all this information onto Akane herself, right? So we start off with this chapter with Akane more of understanding what Urara has already told her, as she sure just like repeats a few of these things like, hey, so Master Issho so Master and Issho Arakawa were friends going back to before they were apprentices together. Urara's like, yes, that's right, they were together when I first met them. A little bit of a joke where Akane's like, oh wow, if she knew both Master and Issho, she must be very old, right? And just a little bit of a joke there, right? But Urara starts to go into a little bit of a flashback, or I guess sort of what we saw last time, a flashback, just divulging more information on both Issho and, of course, Shiguma, right? She says that Shiguma-kun was raised in the back streets of Tokyo. He was an impulsive character, for better or for worse, and he also didn't go to school. She says Issho was, and we eventually now cut into the flashback itself, right? As we see that Issho Arakawa is just like working at the soba shop, Kurihiko soba shop, right? And he is serving some bowls to this old guy, and he's like, hey old man, lunch hours are over, right? And the old guy's like, oh, I see, well, can I get one more cup to wake me up, right? And Isho's like, hey, no, absolutely not, especially not to somebody who doesn't pay, pretty much, right? And as he's pretty much like talking down to this man, the owner of the shop comes in. It's this woman who we will later learn that her husband, who owned the shop, died a little while ago. And they have sort of taken in Issho Arakawa whenever they found him on the streets and pretty much given him a job and some place to live and work in a way. And she's just like, hey, who talks to a customer like that? Like, I can't believe you, Issho, right? And she calls him a little hooligan. It's a little bit of a funny thing. And she asks the person sitting in here, he's got like a nice little sort of like bowler's hat on in a way, except you can sort of tell it's like made out of more of like a canvas like material, not like the felt that we have today. And she just asks this man like, hey, do you want it warmed up or not, right? And the guy just says like, hey, that'll be fine. He's like, sorry, Kyoe, I don't have any money, presumably, right? And she just says like, I guess her name is Kyoe, just says like, hey, so he goes in your tab again, and she's like, yes, I know how this all works, right? We see that this guy leaves the soba shop, and we see that Kyoke just goes over and talks to Issho like, hey, why are you sulking anyway, right? And Isho's just like, what do you mean? You're just giving away free food to all of these people, right? And she's like, well, what do you actually care in the long run? I mean, what does it matter to you? And she says like, hey, you were the one who got into a brawl yesterday and broke a bunch of bowls. You can't even make a simple delivery, right? And she just says like, hey, all I'm doing is doing what my late husband would have done, right? And he hadn't been the man he was, then we wouldn't have taken you in whenever you were passed out on the street, right? Sort of turning this around on a show like, hey, the reason where you're doing this is also the reason that you are working here right now, so be grateful for this, all right, you little scamp, right? But eventually Issho's just like, hey, when are you finally going to teach me soba making then, right? And she says like, hey, well, who would teach a hooligan like you? And he's like, come on, I'm actually serious this time. Like, let me make the soba. And Kyoke just says like, hey, let me ask you then. Look here. This is your family, isn't it? As we see a newspaper article that pretty much just says like, hey, Korogane Gumi Incorporated sales of 8.3 billion yen in 1963, which is a pretty big deal, and it just is like, hey, contacts increase due to Tokyo Olympics demand, which is a very interesting thing, all things considered. So I guess that's the Tokyo Olympics. So I'm actually going to look this up real quick. So Tokyo what would it be, 1964 Olympics? Yeah, that's pretty neat, all things considered. That sort of brings that all together. And then this little bit of a fact of, oh, hey, 8.3 billion yen, like, that is a lot of money. I mean, let's do a yen, and this will be in today's exchange rate, but yen to USD. So what is it? Oh geez. Let me get my numbers right. 8.34. 84.3. If I could count, yes, 83.4. So that's million. Billion. Yeah. Even in today's money, that's just over $500,000, which is a lot of money. It's actually closer to like 550, but yeah, I digress. Let's get back and talking about this chapter, right? So pretty much Kiyoshi just says like, hey, when the firstborn son of a good family gets disowned from wanting to make the world his own way, is it really because he wants to work at a soba shop? Issho, you're only acting on emotion, obligation, comfort, sympathy. When you meet something that you truly can dedicate your life to, it really changes that look in your eyes. And whatever that is for you, I can tell you this, it's not soba. And Kiyoshi just is like, come on, Issho, I don't want you around here forever, so here, go on, take out the trash, right? I'll have you your family meal ready whenever you get back. So Issho goes out back and he dumps the trash in the big dumpster behind the area. And as he's sort of walking back through the street, there's a lot of sort of like ambience going on, like the streets of Tokyo at this time, right? And Issho just thinks like, hey, cities and people change over time, but and all of a sudden over the loudspeakers, we start to hear the song that's sort of playing in the background. It's just saying, hey, there's always tomorrow, there's always tomorrow, there's always another day. I'm sure this is a popular song, if not in Japan, but also just like in the world during the 60s. But whatever it is, I do not know it. But I guess it's sort of a interesting little thing being like this is in the 60s and like knowing how Yuki Tsunaga and Takamasa Moe write their series. I am sure that like this is all working together in a certain way, right? At this point, we see that Issho is starting to walk back up towards the soba shop. As we see, there's sort of this gangster-looking guy standing in front, right? And he's just like, oh yeah, is this where it is? And he's just like, hey man, lunch hours are over. And this guy's like, hey, I'm not here for food. Eating soba gives me the highs. You know what I'm saying? And Issho's like, then what? And all of a sudden, Issho gets punched square in the face, right? And a bunch of passerbys are like, oh no, what's going on? Are they fighting? And we see that one of these audience members is actually Urara, and she's sort of like come by this area again. Maybe she's like a frequent flyer of this sort of general area, right? And this guy just says, oh, thanks, it saves me the trouble. I don't like going into a restaurant alone. And he just like goes and just keeps on punching out Issho as all of this happens. And Isho's like, crap, this guy is totally crazy. He is so damn strong, right? And the gangster's like, what is this, out already? And he turns around and says, come on, Ichi, did you really get beaten up by this scrub? And we see the guy that Issho and Shiguma beat up last time is sitting here, that sort of like boss guy who said like, hey, don't you know how my dad is, right? And he just says like, yeah, that's the guy's dad, right? And this gangster's just like, oh, really? I think I've been a bit overprotective of you. You gotta be able to overpower these opponents, Ichi, right? And it's like, hey, they're both absolute pushovers. As we see it, they already got Shiguma and already beat him to total crap, right? And the guy's like, so yeah, you Mr. Little Guy, talking to Issho on the ground, like, hey, have you learned your lesson yet? Don't play games as a Yakuza boy, right? And he's just like looking like he's almost going to put out the cigarette onto Issho's face. As Kiko just sort of, or her name was Kiko, right? Kyoe, yeah. Kyoe then runs out just like, hey, stop that, he works for us. If this hooligan's done something wrong, then allow me to apologize. This gangster just completely slaps her in the face, right? Or no, the son slaps her in the face. So he shows like, I'm gonna kill you, hairy guy, right? And the gang's like, what'd you just say about my dear son, right? Should you be more worried about yourself, right? As all of a sudden, Issho's just thinking like, damn it, what is going on here? Why are we getting pulverized like this just for being down a hoodlum? This really sucks. He's like, I don't care at this point. I don't care anymore. And all of a sudden, a guy with a soba little bowl appears. And this is the guy that we saw in the beginning of the chapter who was sitting inside the ramen or the soba shop that Issho is working in, right? And the guy that Issho is sort of talking a little bit of crap to, right? And this guy just says, ha ha ha, look at that, you boys are beat the crap. That was a hell of a ruckus you guys just raised around here. As everybody sort of just like stops in their tracks as this happens, right? As this guy just sort of starts to slap down the ramen or the soba, just like, this stuff is still good even though it's cold. It's like, hey, sorry, Kyoke, I ate the food that was for the help, like my total bad here, right? And Sho's like, that's the guy with the tab, what's going on here, right? And the gangster son just says like, hey, who said you could act this way in front of my dad, right? And all of a sudden, the dad just goes and punches his son square in the face. And he says, hey, sorry about that, Ichi, but this is the one man your dad can't disrespect. Not Captain Rakugo. And we see that this guy, Captain Rakugo, goes, finishes off the soba bowl, sort of puts it in Kyoei's hands and says like, hey, thanks for the meal, put it on my tab. And he eventually looks over at the mob boss and just says like, hey, I haven't seen you since our bull. Hey, it's been a long ass time, right? Can you call it even out of just respect for me, right? And he's just like, yeah, of course, right? And the gangster's just like, hey, for the captain who saved my life, anything, right? And we just see that he shows like, who is this guy? What is going on here? As the guy just says, Captain Rakugo just goes like, hey, listen up, kids. Do you guys still want to make some more noise? Then stop on by. And Shiguma's like, hey, stop by where? And Captain Rakugo just says like, hey, ha ha ha, this is in Shinjuku, ain't it? Where else but the Rakugo show at Yasate, or Yasakate. To the Rakugo show at Yasakate, right? And the two of them are just like, Sho, what's going on? And we just get some more narration from Issho's perspective, like, hey, that was the very first time I had experience with Rakugo, and the very first encounter with Master Hyoru Kashiwara. And that's where we end this chapter of Akane-banashi. This was just a really, really fun chapter from like beginning to end. Just seeing what's going on here, getting this really good introduction to who Captain Rakugo is, of course, as we now know him, is Hyoru Kashiwara. Just a really cool chapter through and through, and definitely one that was, while I was reading it, was like, damn, this is like really cool, just seeing like all the gangsters and like having that tie back in from last chapter, eventually leading into this here. Yeah, just a good chapter of Akane-banashi. And with that, that is going to end off all of the chapters I'm talking about in this video. I know it's been a little bit short, being that it has just been 4 chapters, even though it hasn't felt short for me, being that it has been like over 4 days pretty much since I read this issue jump, and I'm finishing up the video. But with that, let's quickly move over to OBS, where I can go by, or let me, if I type it in right, maybe I shouldn't be recording these videos this morning. I am just very, very scatterbrained, right? But yeah, let's pull it up and let's going to go through and start recording. All right, let's move back to it. And oh no, I don't even have my spreadsheet open. This is not good. Let me open it up real quick. And all right, we are now here. Let me scroll all the way on over. You guys can see all my general spreadsheet stuff, right? But here we are on issue 49 of 2024. Of course, the issue that came out at the very tail end of October, even though no, we were at the very tail end of December, or not December, of November. I'm sorry, my mind is melted this morning. But as you can see here, how we ranked the chapters today, I had to give Akane-banashi that best chapter of the week. It was just strictly amazing through and through. Hunter x Hunter that I talked about this chapter was also just really, really awesome. Like, really cool to see the re-entrance of Hisoka and get sort of more of those details going on in the general universe of Hunter x Hunter. Kagurabachi, Also just very good. Like I have always said, there will be a dedicated video to Kagurabachi up on the channel here soon. When it will be out, don't ask me because I honestly don't know, but it'll be out here soon at some point. Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi was pretty good. Blue Box, Ichi the Witch, Elusive Samurai, Uri Dragon, Undead Luck, Himatan, Kill Blue, Astro Royale, and Shinobi Undercover. Yeah, like, everything was pretty good this week. I don't think, like, Shinobi Undercover was bad by any means, or, like, Astro Royale or Kill Blue. They just weren't up to the level that some of these other series were at this point, right? And I really hope that I can talk about Undead Unluck again soon. Like, it has just, like, one of those really banger chapters. I mean, this chapter was good, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't that, like, amazing series. And I lie, I now see that I actually had it open in this tab over here, but okay, whatever. Does not matter. But yeah, Akane-banashi, Hunter x Hunter, Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi, and Ichi the Witch were all some very good chapters at the end of the day. And of course, my character of the week was Kyoru Kashiwara. I really wanted to give it to Hisoka, but because I don't like doubling up, like giving my number one chapter the number one character, or the character. But I think Kiyoku Kashiwara's entrance was just really, really interesting, and I just loved seeing how it was portrayed, so I sort of felt like I had to give it to him at the end of the day. But yeah, with that, that's the spreadsheet for this week. Let me go and stop recording on OBS. That would be nice. We have now stopped recording. So yeah, thank you guys so very much for watching today. This video, like I said, has been a little bit of a good one, and I feel like I've been a little scatterbrained here in this last section, but it is what it is. The content really stays the same at the end of the day. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you want to check out some of my other weekly Shonen Jump videos, I have an entire playlist down in the description down below. Also, the card of this video, and also a podcast on wherever your podcast can be found of this weekly Shonen Jump Talk About segment. Granted, this is a mini episode of this series, not just like a regular episode where I talk about all 13 series I talked about for this week, for instance, or just whenever I talk about 6. This week, I did just talk about 4, so sort of is what it is there, but I think we picked out a good 4 chapters to talk about. I cover plenty of other animated manga-related content on the channel. Go check out that on the YouTube channel. You can very easily navigate it at Glowplasma. I've recently changed it up so it's not Glowplasma 231, even though I just say Glowplasma 231 because it's sort of like instinctual at this point. But yeah, thank you guys so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys next time for Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 50 of 2024. Again, this is issue number 49 of 2024, and I'll catch you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma 231, signing out.